Fat girl was starved in cellar for years. Mountain man fed her first meal and said, never hungry. Again, let her rot. Lord Aldrich Blackthorn snarled, slamming the cellar door. The fat sow must learn discipline. One slice of bread a day will do. Spring of 1914 in Philadelphia should have been filled with blossoms and warmth, but beneath the marble floors of the Blackthorn mansion lay only cold stone and hunger. Evangeline Rosewood, Eva, once a woman of soft curves and laughter, now lay curled on a filthy mattress, little more than skin, draped over bone. Once she had weighed more than 300 pounds. After 5 years of starvation, she weighed scarcely 90. Each day a servant slid a crust of stale bread and a cup of water through the bars. Eat, pig, they jeered. Even as her body wasted, they called her glutton, beast, burden. Eva pressed the bread to her lips, swallowing dry crumbs while tears blurred her vision. She could barely remember the taste of real food, the warmth of stew, the sweetness of ripe fruit. Hunger had become her only companion. That night, as rain lashed the streets above, she whispered a prayer into the darkness. Please, Lord, let me taste life again, just once. A sound answered her, a voice low and thunderous, rumbling through the small cellar window. Is someone down there? Eva's cracked lips parted. Who are you? I heard pain in your cry, the voice said, edged with fury. Are you hurt? I'm hungry, she whispered. 3 days without food. Silence, then a roar that shook the stones themselves. Who dares starve a woman? A shadow filled the window, broad, towering, impossible. Maximus Nourisher, the mountain giant of Harvest Peak, had heard her plea, and he had come. Eva Rosewood had not always lived in shadows. Once, in her girlhood, she had been known for her laughter, her full figure, and the way she could light a room with wit and warmth. But after fever claimed her parents and their debts swallowed the family fortune, she fell into the hands of distant relatives, the Blackthorns. They wrapped their cruelty in silken words. We'll take her in, she'll have a roof, a bed. In truth, they had claimed ownership of her life. Lady Seraphina Blackthorn believed herself refined, but her heart was a slab of stone. Lord Aldrich, her husband, was worse, sneering, vicious, drunk on power. To them, Eva's body was a sin to be punished. She eats too much, they would say at dinners, while she poured their wine. Look at her cheeks, her waist. She's an animal in silk. When she dared taste a sweet roll from the kitchen, they made a decree. She would be locked in the cellar until her greed burned away. That was 5 years ago. At first, she screamed, begged, clawed at the heavy door. Then came the slow erosion of hope. They fed her crumbs, just enough to keep her alive, and laughed at her suffering. Even as her body shrank into bones, they spat the old insult, fat pig. In their eyes, she could never be anything else. Yet Eva endured. Day after day, she whispered prayers. She hummed lullabies her mother once sang. She kept her mind alive when her body was nearly dead. And on that storm-lashed night, her endurance was heard. Maximus Nourisher was a legend whispered in taverns across Pennsylvania. Some said he stood 10 feet tall, with hands that could crush stone. Others said he was a hermit chef, a recluse who fed the starving who stumbled up his mountain. All agreed on one truth. He was as terrifying as he was just. At 63, Max had lived decades alone on Harvest Peak, building a timber lodge with kitchens bigger than banquet halls. He raised crops in mountain soil, smoked meats in great cellars, brewed cider that warmed travelers to the bone. Those who found his home left fed, healed, and astonished. But Max had not ventured into the city for years, until hunger drew him to markets for rare spices. That was when he heard the faintest cry through the rain. At first, he thought it the whimper of an animal. Then he realized it was human. He bent, pressed his ear to the small barred window of the blackthorn cellar, and heard a woman's whisper, "I'm hungry." Fury unlike any he had known surged through him. A woman starved, in a mansion of wealth. It was unthinkable. His great fist slammed the stones. "No more," he growled, "not one day more." Inside, Ava clutched her chest, hardly daring to believe. No one had spoken for her in years. But the thunder in his voice felt like a promise. In that moment, her chains of hunger trembled. Something was coming. Someone who would not let her waste away unseen. And when the blackthorns next opened the door, they would not be the masters of her fate. The lock shattered like a toy under Maximus's massive fist. Hinges screamed as the cellar door swung wide, spilling torchlight into the pit of stone. Ava blinked against the sudden brightness. She had imagined rescue 1,000 times. But when the shadow filled the stairwell, broad shoulders brushing the walls, silver hair spilling like a banner, she thought she was dreaming. Max descended slowly, as if afraid she might break at his touch. His boots shook the steps, his breath misted in the cold air, and when he reached her, he knelt, a giant kneeling before a woman wasting away. "My God," he murmured, voice hoarse with fury and grief, "they starved you to bones." Ava flinched, pressing herself against the wall. Don't hit me. I'll eat faster, I promise." "Shh." His enormous hand hovered inches from her face, trembling. "No one will ever force you again. No one." He slipped off his cloak, thick wool lined with fur, and wrapped it around her frail body. Then, with the gentleness of a father cradling a newborn, he lifted her. She weighed nothing. The truth of that pierced him deeper than any blade. Through the mansion he strode, servants scattering like frightened mice. Lady Seraphina shrieked, demanding explanation. Lord Aldrich raged, but one look into the giant's burning eyes silenced him. At the door, Max left his verdict scrawled in charcoal on the wall. "She will never be hungry again. Seek her, and you face me." Outside, the storm had quieted, leaving the streets washed clean. Horses waited, great black beasts nearly as large as oxen. Max set Ava in a padded wagon, tucking blankets around her until only her pale face showed. The city fell behind them. Brick gave way to forest, forest to ridges laced with snow. Ava clutched the cloak tighter, her lips trembling. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you risk this for me? I'm nothing." Max kept his eyes on the winding path, jaw clenched. "You are not nothing. You are a woman who has endured torment no one should. That makes you more than they will ever be." She closed her eyes, tears slipping free. The wagon rocked steadily, lulled by the clip of hooves. At midnight they stopped beside a stream glazed with ice. Max built a fire in minutes, sparks climbing into the dark sky. From a pack he drew broth, already prepared, and poured it into a tin cup. He held it to her lips. Ava sipped and gasped. It was warm, savory, alive. Tears ran down her cheeks. "I had forgotten," she whispered, "the taste of real food." Max brushed a lock of hair from her sunken face. "This is only the beginning. You will eat until you are strong again, and I will cook for you every day until the end of my life." She stared at him, weak but searching. You don't even know me." A faint smile curved his lips. "I know enough. I know that hunger should never be a prison, and I know that you deserve more than scraps." They traveled on. The road grew steep, snow thickening beneath the horses' hooves. By dawn, mist curled around jagged peaks. High above, timber walls crowned with smoke came into view. A lodge vast as a fortress, windows glowing gold. Max's voice softened as the mountain revealed itself. "This is Harvest Peak, my home, and now yours, if you choose it." Ava's breath caught. After years in darkness, here lay light. After years of scraps, here promised abundance. For the first time since she was a child, hope flickered in her chest. She turned her hollow eyes to the man beside her, the giant who had torn down her prison with bare hands. "Then, I choose." Harvest Peak rose like a cathedral carved from stone and pine. Maximus's lodge stood at its heart, walls of oak, beams hewn thick as tree trunks, a hearth roaring like the sun. Yet the true throne room was his kitchen. When Ava first crossed the threshold, she stopped in disbelief. Row upon row of shelves lined with jars of honey, sacks of flour, baskets of apples and potatoes, hooks laden with smoked hams and dried herbs. Copper pots gleamed from the rafters. The air itself carried a perfume of spice and firewood. She clutched the door frame, trembling. All of this is real?" "All real," Max said gently, guiding her inside. "And all for you." He sat her at a broad wooden table carved with years of use. Then he set about cooking with a reverence that bordered on worship. Flames licked the skillet as he seared meat. A pot bubbled with broth rich and golden. He sliced bread still warm from the oven, its crust crackling. Ava watched, mesmerized. She had been denied food so long that the simple act of cooking seemed miraculous. When he placed the first bowl before her, a delicate chicken soup with carrots and herbs, she burst into tears. I can't," she stammered. What if I'm sick?" Max knelt beside her. "Then we will go slow, one spoon at a time. I'll not let you suffer." He fed her himself, spoon steady in his enormous hand. The first taste slid over her tongue, warmth spreading through her hollow body. She sobbed openly, clutching the bowl. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "I had forgotten what joy tasted like." "This is only the beginning," he replied. "You will never eat in fear again." From that day, meals became their rhythm. Mornings began with porridge, sweetened by honey. Midday brought roasted fish from the mountain streams. Evenings glowed with stews, fresh bread, apples baked until golden. Max never hurried her, never scolded if she ate little, always watching with patient eyes. And Ava began to change. Color crept back into her cheeks. Her hands, once skeletal, grew steady. She no longer shivered constantly. By the fire, she sat straighter. But it was not only her body that healed. Her spirit, long battered by cruelty, slowly unfurled. At first she barely spoke, answering in whispers. But Max would ask about her childhood, her parents, the songs her mother sang. One night, haltingly, she began to hum. Her voice cracked, then steadied. Max closed his eyes, listening as though to a hymn. "You carry music," he said softly. "It should never have been silenced." She flushed. "No one ever cared to hear it." "I care." They shared the labor of the mountain, too. Max showed her how to knead dough, her fragile hands pressing into the flour while his enormous ones folded over hers to guide the motion. He let her stir pots, peel apples, grind herbs. She laughed the first time flour streaked across her face, and he laughed with her, a sound so deep it shook the beams. Each small task rebuilt her dignity. Where once she had eaten scraps from the floor, now she prepared feasts with her own hands. One evening, as snow piled against the windows, Max carried a tray to the table: roast venison, buttered beans, a pie of spiced pumpkin. Ava stared at the spread, tears brimming. "This is too much for me," she whispered. He shook his head. "Not too much. Enough. Enough to remind you that the world is abundant and you are worthy of it." Her hand trembled as she lifted her fork. "You treat me like a queen." His eyes softened, blue as glacier ice. "No, like what you are, a woman who deserves respect. But if you wish to be a queen, then I will build you a throne." For the first time in years, she laughed without sorrow. By the fire later that night, she looked at him with a new kind of warmth. "Max, why do you do this for me?" He stirred the flames with an iron poker, his voice rough. "Because no soul should starve, because feeding another is the truest act of love I know, and because—" He paused, the firelight glinting on the scars of his hands. "Because I cannot bear the thought of you fading from this world." Ava's breath caught. She felt the heat not only from the fire, but from something rising between them, tender, fierce, undeniable. And for the first time since the cellar, her hunger was no longer just for food. Peace never lasts long when cruelty feels cheated. For months, Ava's cheeks grew rounder, her body regaining strength. She laughed more, sang while kneading dough, and filled Max's lodge with warmth it had never known. Yet beyond the mountain, whispers began to stir. Merchants who passed through Philadelphia carried tales. "The Blackthorn girl has escaped. She was stolen by a giant hermit. They say he fattens her up like livestock." Each telling grew uglier, poisoned by malice. One evening, while Ava was shelling peas by the fire, Max returned from town with his jaw set. He laid down a folded notice, the ink still damp. Ava read the words and felt her stomach knot. Wanted. The return of Evangeline Rosewood, property of Lord Aldrich Blackthorn. Reward, $500. Her hands shook. "Property," she whispered. "They still see me as theirs." Max crushed the paper in his massive fist. "You are not their property. You are yours. And if they come, they'll find more than they bargained for." But Ava's old fears seeped back. At night, she dreamed of the cellar door slamming shut, of voices mocking her body, of hunger gnawing her bones. Max would wake to her sobs and gather her close, murmuring, "Never again. You're safe." Still, danger crept closer. One stormy night, as wind howled through the pines, a lantern glowed at the edge of the lodge clearing. Then another, then 5. Max rose, his face grim. "They've come." Ava gripped his arm. "Please don't fight them. You'll be killed." He cupped her face in both hands, thumb brushing her cheek. "Listen to me. I've fought hunger, cold, wild beasts, and worse. I will not fall to cowards who starve women for sport. But you—" His voice broke. "You must be ready to speak for yourself, to tell them you will not return." Her heart thundered. "I don't know if I can." "Yes, you can. You survived 5 years in a cellar. You are stronger than you know." The door shuddered under a pounding fist. "Open, in the name of the Blackthorn family," a voice barked. Max unlatched the door and stepped into the snow, towering above the intruders. 6 hired men bristled with rifles, and behind them stood Lord Aldrich himself, wrapped in a velvet cloak, sneer sharp as a knife. "There she is!" Aldrich pointed past Max into the cabin. "My property! Hand her over!" Max's growl rolled like thunder. "She is not yours. She is free." "She is ours by law," Aldrich snapped. "And you, mountain savage, you've corrupted her. She belongs in discipline, not indulgence." Ava's knees buckled. The cellar walls seemed to close in again. But then Max looked back at her, not pleading, not commanding, simply steady, a lighthouse in the storm. And Ava understood. This was her moment. She stepped into the doorway, cloak wrapped tight, voice trembling but loud enough to carry, "I am not your property. I am not a pig, not a lesson, not a shame to be hidden. I am Evangeline Rosewood, and I will never return to your prison." The men faltered. They had expected silence, weakness, not fire. Aldrich's face purpled. "Ungrateful wretch!" Max's hand fell on his shoulder with crushing weight. "Say another word, and you'll eat snow tonight." Rifles lifted, but the wind roared, snuffing lanterns one by one. Darkness cloaked the clearing. Max's towering frame loomed like a mountain, unshaken. "Leave," he commanded, "or face me." One by one, the mercenaries lowered their guns. They had been paid in coin, not courage. Muttering, they drifted back into the storm. Aldrich stood trembling, rage hollow in his eyes. Finally, he spat at the snow and fled. When silence returned, Ava sagged against the doorframe. Her chest heaved, but her eyes burned with a strength she had never known. Max gathered her into his arms, voice rough with pride. "You see? You have more power than hunger, than cruelty, than their lies. You spoke, and they listened." Ava buried her face in his chest, tears hot against his coat. "I never believed I could." "You can," he whispered, kissing her brow. "You just did, and you will again." For the first time, Ava felt not only safe, but free. The weeks that followed were filled with fragile peace. Snow melted from the eaves of Harvest Peak, rivers broke their icy chains, and Ava's laughter returned to the kitchen. Yet both she and Max knew Aldrich Blackthorn was not finished. A man who thrived on domination would never bear such humiliation quietly. The final storm came at dusk. Ava was setting bread to rise when the dogs barked deep and frantic. Max strode to the window, and his jaw hardened. Torches burned through the trees, not 5 or 6 this time, but dozens. The Blackthorns had raised an army of hired guns. Ava's pulse pounded. "Max!" He caught her hand, steady and unyielding. "Whatever happens, you're not a prisoner anymore. Stand with me." Outside, the night blazed with torchlight. Men fanned across the clearing, rifles gleaming. At their center stood Aldrich, cloaked in sable, face twisted with triumph. "This ends tonight," he shouted. "Give her back, or we burn this hovel to ash with you in it." Max stepped forward, a tower of flesh and iron. "She is no man's property, and you will not touch a splinter of this home." Aldrich sneered. "You think one brute can defy the law?" Then Ava moved. She walked past Max, cloak trailing in the snow, and raised her voice so it carried over the mob. "I was starved in a cellar until my bones broke through my skin. You called it discipline. You called me animal. But I lived, I endured, and now I stand free. I will never return to your chains." Her words cracked the night like lightning. Some men shifted uneasily, torches lowering. They had not signed on to drag a defiant woman back to torment. Aldrich's face twisted. "Enough! Take her!" He surged forward, only to find himself seized. Max's hand closed around his collar, lifting him clear off the ground as though he weighed nothing. "You starved a woman until she begged for crumbs," Max growled, voice rolling like thunder. Look at her now, stronger than you will ever be. If you step foot on this mountain again, Aldrich Blackthorn, I will bury you beneath it." He hurled the man into the snow, where he scrambled, cloak torn, dignity shattered. His hired men, seeing their master broken, dropped torches and fled into the forest. Silence fell, broken only by the crackle of the hearth inside. Ava stood trembling, not from fear, but from release. She had spoken her truth. She had watched her captor fall. Max turned to her, snow glinting silver in his hair. "It's over?" Ava stepped into his arms, voice steady for the first time. "No, Max, it's just beginning." And as the flames of the last torch died, Harvest Peak belonged not to the Blackthorns, but to them. The snow had stopped by the time Max bolted the great door. The mountain lay hushed, wrapped in a deep, forgiving silence. Inside, the hearth roared, spilling gold across the log walls. Ava sat curled on a wide chair, bread dough still dusting her hands, eyes wide with all she had just witnessed. Max knelt before her, lowering his immense frame so he could look her in the eye. "You're safe here," he said quietly. "No thunder, no fury, only truth." Ava swallowed hard, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Safe," she repeated, as if testing the word for the first time. "You never go hungry again," he promised, "not while I have strength to lift an axe, to tend a field, to stir a pot. This is your home now, if you'll have it." Her heart clenched. For years she had been told she was nothing but appetite and shame. Now, in this cabin smelling of wood smoke and fresh bread, she felt herself remade. She reached for his rough hand. "It isn't just your home, Max. It's ours." They sat there as the fire cracked and the night pressed close outside. No vows spoken, no priest in sight, only the simple knowledge that something unbreakable had been forged between them. And yet, as the flames danced, Ava's gaze flicked to the window, to the wilderness beyond. She knew the world still waited out there. Towns that might sneer, men like Aldrich who might rise again, battles yet to come. Could love and the promise of never hungering again truly stand against all that? For now, Ava leaned into Max's shoulder, letting warmth surround her. Tomorrow could bring what it wished. Tonight, she was safe. Every time I finish telling Ava and Max's story, I'm reminded of how powerful hope can be when the world tries to strip it away. Maybe you felt small, unheard, or pushed aside, just as Ava once was. But her story shows that love, dignity, and belonging can still find us in the darkest places. Now, I want to hear from you. Where are you listening from tonight? Leave a comment and share your story. And if you still believe in love that heals and protects, don't go anywhere. The next tale is waiting just for you.